It might have lacked the usual thrills and spills that we've come to associate with the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, but today's race in Baku was absolutely unbelievable. Hello folks, and welcome to my thoughts on the Azerbaijan Grand Prix of 2024, won by Oscar Piastri in a scintillating race. We've come to expect brilliant things when we go to Baku, and this one delivered in a very different way. Obviously, the classic races of 2017 and 2018 featured crashes and drama and headrests coming out and wild overtakes, collisions between teammates, all sorts of things going on. But this race was just one of pure speed. It was a ferocious battle at the front. Three different teams at the front. And it was just, it had you on the edge of your seat the whole way through because you weren't quite sure which way the race was going to turn next. Thoroughly enjoyable. And obviously Oscar Piastri, let's start there. Victory number 2 for the Australian in his less than 2 years in Formula One now. But he's the real deal, isn't he? If you had any doubts before, there shouldn't be any now, because he absolutely is. There was obviously a little bit of fortune with the win in Budapest and the fact that McLaren team had to beg Lando Norris to give up the position after they'd put him in front through strategy, which was just a bit silly. But Oscar absolutely dominated this race. Once he got in front, I never felt that he was truly going to lose the lead. Leclerc was close on a number of occasions, but it soon became apparent that the Ferrari didn't have what it took to get past into turn 1, and there wasn't enough of a slipstream down into turn 3. It's a little bit too tight in there, so you're not really going to go for a late lunge because it's probably going to end up in disaster. But Oscar, once he was in front, so composed, so assured for someone so young. It's been a long time since we saw someone so young with such little experience at the same time be as composed as he is. And there's none of this late moving under braking. There's no late lunges. Everything is methodical. Everything is calculated. He's almost a modern version of Alain Prost in that sense. It's very clinical. There's no real sort of there is a certain amount of flamboyance to the things he does, but it's not, Ayrton Senna driving the wheels off the thing sort of from the outside. Obviously, he's driving incredibly fast and with immense precision, and he's taking all the risks that he can with the car, but he's doing it so assuredly, with so much sort of calm. He just exudes relaxation, and even on the radio, never seems flustered. It's just brilliant to watch. And in that sense, with winning the race in the way that he did, he's done exactly the job that McLaren needed him to do on both the Constructors and Drivers' Championship front. Because if you're going to ask Piastri to support Lando Norris's title bid, the first thing he needs to do is win when Lando Norris doesn't have the opportunity to win. Lando didn't have the opportunity to win today, so Oscar went and won the race. Job done. And also, it's a vital blow in their championship fight with Red Bull for the Constructors' Championship. McLaren now lead the Constructors' Championship for, I think, probably the first time since maybe 2012. It might even be longer than that. So McLaren have not been the top team in the Constructors' Championship standings for a very long time. This is a bit of a seminal moment for this team, because this isn't the McLaren that we used to know and love, that was run by Ron Dennis, that raced in silver or red and white, depending on how old you are. Obviously, this is the Papaya McLaren. And they are now very much the team to beat. It's a real shot in the arm, and it shows the strength of that team, because even today, Sergio Perez was very good, but he never looked like winning the race, and Max Verstappen was struggling. Red Bull have this car that seems to be limiting both their drivers at different circuits. Obviously, Verstappen generally will have the upper hand, but Perez today, he's a Baku specialist. He was very, very fast, but I think that was the limit of the Red Bull this weekend, because even Max Verstappen, with all of his skill and talent, couldn't drag anything more than a fortunate P5 out of that car. And let's talk about Oscar Piastri's teammate, Lando Norris. P4 in the end, a bit fortunate, but he would have finished P6 without the collision between Perez and Carlos Sainz on the final couple of laps. But he got ahead of Verstappen. And I know it's only a 3-point game, which isn't the sort of mathematical game that you need, and maybe you can argue, and I would sort of make the point that this is why you give up the position with Piastri in Monza when it's not for a win, because there's a possibility of a weekend like this where Lando ended up 17th in qualifying. You know, he's only gained 3 points today. He could have gained even more last time out in Monza. So it's, you know, that's why you have to make those decisions then and make sure you know exactly who you're backing for the title. But while it's not the points game, is it a more damaging blow to the psyche of Verstappen and his sort of confidence in this title fight? Yeah, it's still a 50-odd point lead. I think it's 59 points he leads by. But if he knows that even on a day or a weekend where Norris has qualified way down the order, that he can still make his way forward and beat him, then surely that plays to his psyche and going, actually, I've got to do something to stop this. We know what Max Verstappen's like when he's under pressure. We've seen it earlier this season in Austria. He gets a little bit over the edge in the same way that Michael Schumacher did, Ayrton Senna as well. They both crossed lines when having to defend against other drivers and protect their position. And we obviously live in the social media age where it's criticised to the nth degree, but you know, you can only criticise what you see on track, and we've seen Verstappen do it in the past. He has a track record of that. There have been other times, of course, where he has been absolutely exemplary. The pressure is going to ramp up as we get closer and closer to the checkered flag in Abu Dhabi. And how will Max Verstappen respond to it? Because obviously he didn't have a good weekend this weekend. Outperformed by his teammate, who obviously ended up in the wall. But more damaging perhaps is the fact that Lando Norris came past and there was nothing he could do about it. Absolutely nothing. And then he went for the soft tyres just as the crash happened on lap 50, and he was not given the opportunity to use them to get that fastest lap bonus point. So yeah, I think there's a real sort of mental game going on now in the Drivers' Championship, and maybe Verstappen could start to feel the heat. Will he tense up? Will it bring more mistakes and more opportunities for Lando Norris? We'll have to see in the coming races. Let's talk about Franco Colapinto and Oliver Bearman, two Formula 2 drivers who have stepped up to Formula 1 this season, both in their second F1 race around streets of Baku, which have caught out some of the very best in history in Formula 1, and they both finished in the points, of course boosted by the late collision between Perez and Sainz. But as the old saying goes, if you want to finish first you must finish. Obviously they didn't finish first, they finished 8th and 10th respectively. So, you know, absolutely credit to the pair of them to jump into a Formula 1 car and get the hang of it. Essentially, these things are not easy to drive, especially around the streets of Baku. Phenomenal performance from both of them. And Colapinto, qualifying in the top 10, ran in the top 10 for much of the race. Bearman was scrapping with the likes of Lewis Hamilton. It was just brilliant. That is the next generation of Formula 1, showing what they can do in the here and now. Sadly for Colapinto, he doesn't have a drive for next season. You know, obviously Carlos Sainz is available. He's a race winner. He's going to be a fantastic addition to the Williams team. Can they maybe get him in at Sauber? Maybe, but will Sauber, Audi want that for next season? They might be better off sticking with Bottas. That's a whole different conversation. But Franco's putting himself in the shop window for someone else if there's an opportunity that arises at another team to sub in, or a seat opens up more permanently. And obviously we know Oliver Bearman is going to be in the Haas alongside Esteban Ocon in 2025. Let's chat about the final lap, or the closing laps incident with Sergio Perez and Carlos Sainz. It all started where Charles Leclerc sort of re-lunged Sergio Perez for second place. I think that was just about fair because, yeah, Perez had sort of the nose ahead, but Leclerc was clearly enough alongside to make that. There was no wheel banging, enough space was left. Obviously, it wrong-footed Perez. It allowed Sainz to come through, who then was basically, I think, trying to square the car up so he could get a nice run on his teammate to get the slipstream, maybe protect him, secure the second and third place for Ferrari. And they just met in the middle. I don't think Sainz is necessarily at fault. I'm not sure Perez is really at fault. He could have moved a little bit more, left a little bit more space, perhaps because the space was more on his side. Sainz is always going to move left to squeeze him because the next corner is a left-hand turn. So you're going to try and compromise your opponent's entry to that corner as much as possible. So tricky to sort of afford blame anywhere. If anything, for me, it's a racing incident. It's just one of those things that happens. Spectacular crash. Glad that everybody is okay, and obviously glad that everybody is okay from the Formula 2 race earlier today, where 3 drivers were involved in a start line crash in which Pepe Marti rolled his Campos. Spectacular scenes. All 3 drivers okay. So yeah, that was an exciting race as well. If you haven't seen that, go and check out the highlights when they're posted on YouTube. Yeah, let me know what you think about the Perez and Sainz incident. I'm going to sit on the fence and say it's a racing incident. Let me know in the comments. Perez at fault, Sainz at fault, racing incident. Who's getting splinters with me and sitting on the fence? Alternative driver of the day. Something I like to do when I do these little post-race chats. Normally I do them pre-stream, but I'm going to do it very much pre-stream today. We're going to crack straight on with the Aston Martin save randomised grid. If you haven't seen that, I'll leave a link up in the top corner for you to have a look at it as well. Driver of the day, of course, was Oscar Piastri. I'm going to give it to Franco Colapinto. He did another fantastic job, picked up points, and basically he did the job that Williams have been expecting Logan Sargent to do. The car's there to score points, and both drivers for Williams scored points today. So absolutely credit where credit's due. Phenomenal drive from Franco, as I spoke about earlier, and very, very well deserved. And I'm going to rate the race as well, as always. Out of 10, I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10. 3 different teams at the front. This is what F1 is all about. We want to see great drivers fighting at the front, very close. And we had 3 different cars at the front. It was great. It's nice sometimes to see like teammates battle at the front when the Hamilton-Rosberg years. We've seen Vettel and Webber go toe-to-toe. Obviously, we've got the old footage of Senna and Prost at McLaren. That's always good fun. But 3 different cars at the front, 3 fantastic drivers. Obviously, Perez, a specialist around Baku. And just the way that they raced each other. Piastri and Leclerc dicing it out through turn 1. The moves were aggressive, but they were fair. There was nothing ever to say that's possibly going to cause a collision. It was all very clear what was happening, and both drivers were on the same page. And this is what happens when you have drivers working off the same hymn sheet when they're in combat. It just gives just that extra element of quality to the racing. It's so satisfying to watch. Really, really is, because there are other times where you look at drivers racing each other up and down the grid and you think, do you need to race like that? You know, we know that the likes of Kevin Magnussen and Esteban Ocon can be very aggressive in the way they race other drivers. And sometimes you're left begging the question, why are they so aggressive? It's just going to end up in tears, and invariably it does. Obviously, Kevin Magnussen serving a race ban this weekend. So to see such quality racing, such close quarters racing around such a high speed and tricky circuit for the lead of the Grand Prix, 3 cars, then 4 cars, obviously with Sainz joining in at the end, possibly able to win the Grand Prix. Just absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to give this race a 9 out of 10. Let me know who your alternative driver of the day is in the comments as well, and what you would rate the race. I thoroughly enjoyed that race. So yeah, they're my thoughts. Let me know what you thought of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, and we get to do it all again next weekend in Singapore. A night race. Will it rain? That could spice things up. Going to be very, very interesting. So yeah, all that's left for me to say is thank you, Baku. You're the best fans. It's bye for now.